All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the literal perfect storm of leadership, climate, and military innovation that allowed a marginalized nomadic people to forge the absolute largest contiguous land empire in human history. We'll be looking at how an incredible convergence of human grit and ecological anomalies completely redrew the map of the world.
Here's how we're breaking this down today. Shattering the horde myth, survival on the steppe, fueling the empire with climate data, the Mongol military machine, a masterpiece of maneuver, and finally, a warning from history. From childhood survival to ancient tree ring data, it's a fascinating ride.
Part 1. Shattering the horde myth. First things first, to really grasp 12th century realities, we have to completely erase that old European myth of the Mongols as just some mindless, disorganized, savage horde.
Think about this massive paradigm shift. Right around 1163, Europe is busy laying the bricks for giant, static monuments like the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. But out on the Asian steppe, it's a completely different universe. People weren't building cathedrals. They were locked in a brutal, everyday fight for basic survival. They were navigating extreme weather, centuries-old blood feuds, and a deeply divided political landscape where just staying alive required constant vigilance.
Which brings us to Part 2. Survival on the steppe. To really understand Genghis Khan, we have to look at how an unimaginably brutal childhood in this harsh environment forged the resilience of a man originally named Temujin.
So imagine being left with literally nothing. His father, Yasuge, is murdered by rival Tartars, and his own tribe completely abandons his family to the freezing winter. To survive, Temujin makes an incredibly ruthless choice. He actually executes his own domineering half-brother Bektar to assert control. Later on, he gets captured by the rival Taichu tribe, humiliated and strapped into a heavy wooden collar called a kungay. Yet he pulls off this insane escape by knocking out a guard and hiding in a freezing river. I mean, this wasn't some cushy upbringing. It was a masterclass in raw survival and observing the true nature of human loyalty.
And you can trace this intense grit right back to his strong-willed mother, Hwelun. She was the one holding them together out in the wilderness, telling her kids, "We don't have any friends except our shadows." Wow, right? Her words hardwired this absolute, unconditional loyalty into her children. It was a dark, isolated existence for sure, but it bred an unbreakable cohesion that became the absolute bedrock of the future Mongol Empire.
Moving to Part 3, Fueling the Empire Through Climate. Temujin survives, unites the tribes, and becomes Genghis Khan. But ambition alone doesn't conquer the world. You need massive resources. And that brings us to the hard science of dendrochronology, or tree ring dating. To figure out how they exploded across Eurasia so fast, we need to talk about a pluvial. Simply put, a pluvial is a prolonged period of abundant moisture. Because the Mongol war machine, it didn't run on oil, it ran on grass. Check out this climate data pulled from ancient Siberian pine trees growing on a lava field. It is a total anomaly. See that massive spike on the far right? That represents an unprecedented 15-year warm and intensely wet stretch from 1211 to 1225 CE. We're talking an unmatched climatic event over a 1,112-year timeline. This Mongol fluvial caused a massive explosion of grassland, and more grass meant they could support staggeringly huge herds of horses and livestock.
This sudden jolt of biological energy was a total game-changer. It gave the newly unified Mongols the massive surplus they needed to build centralized hubs like Karakoram and project overwhelming force outward. The steppe essentially turned into an overflowing battery, charging up their expansion into China, Persia, and way beyond.
Part 4. The Mongol Military Machine. Let's see exactly how they channeled all that ecological momentum into a highly organized system. Because Genghis Khan wasn't just unleashing a wild mob. He built a highly calculated machine using a strict decimal system. You had 10 men forming an arban, which scaled all the way up to a tumen of 10,000. And the discipline? Ironclad. If one guy ran from battle, his entire 10-man squad was executed. No exceptions. It completely wiped out those old tribal rivalries and forged this unbreakable loyalty to the unit and the Khan. So how do you even train an army like that? Well, they used the Nurj. Basically, the most high-stakes, stressful hunting trip in human history. Picture a massive circle of horsemen, like 80 miles across, slowly contracting to drive wild game into the center. You had to have flawless communication over huge distances. If an animal slipped past you, you paid for it.
It was literally a giant military simulation of maneuver warfare, cleverly disguised as a winter hunt.
On top of that, they had the Keshik, which functioned almost like an elite military staff college. But their ultimate secret weapon? Pure, unfiltered meritocracy. While European armies were handing command to nobles regardless of their actual skill, the Mongols only cared about results. That's how a blacksmith's son named Subutai could rise all the way up to supreme command based purely on his tactical brilliance, eventually conquering more territory than anyone before him.
Part 5. A masterpiece of maneuver. Let's jump to the 1241 invasion of Hungary to see Subutai's terrifying genius in action.
After tearing through Europe with a brilliant multi-pronged invasion, Subutai runs into a serious roadblock at the Battle of Mohi, King Bala IV's heavily fortified wagon camp. The Hungarians had literally chained heavy wagons together in a massive defensive ring. Charging a fortified position like that with light cavalry? Absolute suicide. So, what's the play?
Instead of throwing his men into a meat grinder, Subutai orchestrates a brilliant encirclement, hammering the camp with arrows and early siege weapons. But, and here's the absolute genius part, he purposely leaves a gap, a clear escape route on one side of his lines. It was a calculated psychological trap. The desperate Hungarians took the bait, abandoning their safe defenses and pouring out into the open field to escape. And right there, stripped of their fortifications, the highly mobile Mongol cavalry was waiting.
The results were staggering. An estimated 70,000 Hungarians were killed as they were systematically hunted down over the following days. It's a dark but perfect example of the unmatched efficiency of Mongol maneuver warfare and their incredibly deep understanding of enemy psychology.
Finally, Part 6. A warning from history. Let's connect climate and society and bring this whole 1112-year timeline right back to the present day. The scientific data shows us that an intense drought back in the 1180s actually sparked the political chaos and tribal warfare that originally paved the way for Genghis Khan to rise. But here's where it gets really real for us. The data also shows that the devastating drought modern Mongolia just went through was the hottest in over a millennium. It was massively amplified by modern Anthropocene warming, pushing temperatures way beyond the historical baseline and causing rapid forced urbanization as rural livelihoods literally collapsed.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this profound warning, etched right into those ancient tree rings. If sudden, natural shifts in climate could completely redraw the map of the 13th century world, birthing the Mongol Empire from a perfect storm of weather and ambition, what does our rapidly warming modern climate hold for the future of our civilization? History makes one thing absolutely crystal clear. When the climate shifts, society shifts right along with it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.